Welcome to Running on Ice, the coolest community in freight. I'm your host, Mary O'Connell, bringing you the latest tech updates, warehouse news, and everything happening in the cold chain world. Not only is there the coolest show in freight, but there's also Running on Ice, the newsletter that couldn't be colder. You can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. Today, we welcome Hannah Sieber, CEO at Artyc. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
Thanks, Mary. I'm stoked to be here.
I'm really excited for today because I have been a longtime follower of Artyc. Well, like long enough that I once upon a time saw a press release for the Medsto, which we'll get into today. And I said, this is so cool. And here we are now, many moons later. I'm very excited. Before we get too far into everything that you guys have, let's get some background on you and kind of how you got started with Artyc.
For sure. So my background is in batteries and really in commercializing batteries. So prior to Artyc, I started another company focused on creating, I think about 0.5 kilowatt-hour and up power stations. So really replacements to fuel generators. And I got really interested in the cold chain while I was back in grad school. It was a combination of the COVID-19 pandemic and kind of understanding ruptures in our cold chain in terms of medical and vaccine distribution. And then honestly learning more and more and just realizing how much the cold chain was this invisible backbone that powers so much of our modern economy. And so, on one hand, I was getting really excited because the kind of supply chain, operations, physical world nerd of me was like, wow, this is incredible. This is kind of behind the scenes, making everything happen. And then at the same time, the IPCC report came out, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. And refrigerants were top of the list, right? And so most people don't know this, but refrigerants are considered some of the most noxious and kind of from a carbon equivalent perspective, most impactful greenhouse gases. And the cold chain is responsible for 4% of global emissions. And so, I started to think about, could I use my background in batteries to electrify the cold chain? And what would it look like to bring both more resilience and just higher quality cold chain, but also do it in a more sustainable way. And so, that was kind of the two things swirling in my head. And it kind of came together to ultimately build Artyc starting in 2021.
I absolutely love that. I'm not, I know that there's come January 1st, we have the AIM Act, which is designed to reduce HFCs in the cold chain and everything like that, which is annoying for those that aren't quite on the trend yet. But for the longevity of it, I gotta say it's a good move in the right direction. It's just going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt to get everyone on board. But hey, no time like the present to get that sorted out.
Yeah, and phase out will be a process, right? By no means is Artyc going to come in and displace everyone using refrigerants today, but really providing that option when you are making the kind of switch in your cold chain and you are thinking about upgrading to also having more visibility, more customizability. You can think about what we do is honestly on demand and giving everyone complete flexibility to how they think about temperature, data monitoring, track and trace capabilities, and more.
And in the dry van side of things, I like to say there's plenty of freight to go around. In the cold chain side of things, there's plenty of freight to go around. There's plenty of cold chain solutions for everybody. It's just a matter about what works best for everyone. So speaking of some of those things that work best for everyone, you guys have some really impressive solutions over there. Do you mind breaking down the Medsto product, which is kind of the first thing that led me to you guys, if I may be so bold. But do you mind breaking down Medsto and kind of what it does and kind of just the cool things about it?
Yeah, the cool things. So the Medsto products are a kind of portfolio or suite of products. Like the name implies, Medsto, they're meant for really the medical and the pharmaceutical industries. And they are kind of a full stack solution, or you can think of it in that, like a one-stop shop for doing all of your cold chain shipping and cold chain needs. And so the first thing you can think of them as is, kind of the physical shipper. And so in this case, we build battery-powered hardware that, can maintain precise temperatures throughout the duration. And so people like to think of them as like portable freezers or portable fridges. You're able to ship them. Some of them you're able to ship. Some are designed more for intracampus movements or, for wheeling around. But kind of the first thing is the active cooling piece, right? So battery powered, precise temperatures, and really kind of strong stability. And then embedded in that, we have a whole suite of sensors. And so we're providing kind of that second piece, which is the whole data layer. So instead of needing to put, a temp log or kind of a GPS tracker in your package, what we provide is the ability to have kind of soup to nuts, visibility. Um, and again, that's fully customizable. So you're able to say, okay, I want a certain interval data tracking, or I want a certain type of data tracking. And so that data layer then, instead of choosing which packages you're tracking, gives you kind of peace of mind to say, hey, everything I ship is tracked. And then that comes together with, on our kind of software platform, features like fleet dashboards or kind of study level tracking, where you're able to see if you're running an entire clinical study across the board, where all the packages are, if there've been any, you'll get notifications if there've been any event excursions, even drops and kind of shock notifications, and something has been opened or tampered with. So all of that is kind of inclusive. And then that really leads us to kind of the final, piece of the puzzle, which is that customizability or that kind of on-demand piece. And so instead of thinking of it like you might have a specific box for your controlled room temp, a specific package for 2 to 8, and a specific package for frozen, this allows you to kind of set the temperature and then automatically have the preconditioning. And so you don't need you don't need 72-hour lead times to freeze gel packs. You don't need to worry quite as much. Everything is reusable and everything is meant to be designed on a per shipment basis. And I should mention, these suite of products are really middle mile and last mile. So we're talking about small batch here, not big pallets, not replacing reefers. But these are really meant to support what's happening in clinics, pharmacies, hospitals, and even direct to patient.
I really this is kind of a overall theme that we've seen, especially in the last few months with a lot of new things coming out, and that is kind of that, it's kind of the what happens from the time it leaves my hands to where it needs to go. And I mean, we saw it a couple weeks ago when we were talking to someone about, the use of telematics and knowing when a reefer unit turns off, because sometimes if the unit turns off for a couple hours and then but it arrives at the warehouse cold, nobody knows that potentially could be damaged or like not like it needs to go to quality or needs to have a quality check. And so I like that you guys encompass that as well. So that way it's more than just I kind of like that visibility is now more than just like, oh, it's on this truck 20 miles away, it's going to be here in a half hour. It's more than that. It's more of like, what is actually happening in there? Did it get dropped? And if it did get dropped, like, could there be a spill? Is there something inside there? Like, if it's especially in the pharmaceutical and medical space, if it's a specimen, did the specimen, like, did we lose that? Could that potentially be contaminated with something else? So it's just, I really like that people are bringing visibility as more than just here's where it is on a truck, have a nice, and this is the temperature it's at. It's really, what is happening while I'm there or while I'm not there. And I love that everybody is taking that to heart and saying like, no, you should be able to know what's happening to your stuff.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with like making meaning of the data, right? And making sure we're not just collecting data for data's sake, but rather, this is really correlated to how you build, a better business, how you build um, an opportunity to kind of serve more patients. For many of our customers, it's, lowering costs and having that peace of mind. If you're shipping, anything expensive out, of course, you want kind of full monitoring from the time it's sent all the way to delivery. And so for us, we think about it as, what are the key things that would change your workflow and like or change your customer's workflow, and how do we make sure we're collecting the data and sharing the data that would affect that? So spills, um, you know, you don't want it if you're shipping sensitive IP or specific drug, you don't want it to end up in someone's wrong hands. So some of that kind of chain of custody. You want to make sure, of course, from it, if you're shipping biologics or anything that, you stay within spec and stay within protocol. So, those are the types of things that we make sure the data we collect really helps inform.
I think that also, having all of this data is really great from that quality perspective. And, that way, without a doubt that that customer is getting this medication or getting whatever they need. And there's no doubt in your mind that there is that quality stamp that comes with it. And I just really appreciate that that is something that more and more people are getting on board with. And you guys are also on board with. But recently, you guys have started a little bit of a pilot program with kind of sending out different products, or I guess mostly the Medsto products, and just really putting it through its paces. What are some of the things that you guys learned? Did you learn that there's a weird application for your product you never expected, or was it just a huge like? Did everything go well? What was some of the good stuff from it?
Yeah. So, we did a lot of shipping over this past summer. And it's interesting. In July, we actually had our hottest day ever on record. It was reported by Axios. And so, with that, we saw pretty strong temperature extremes, well over 50 degrees C, so about over 122 Fahrenheit. Uh, and that, kind of plays out just to this kind of world we're seeing in general, which is an incredibly volatile world where shipping is, hugely impacted by um, geopolitics, by temperature, and kind of geography, by natural disaster. And so, focusing on heat for a moment, um, we saw, extreme heats in a lot of our pilots this summer, and we were able to maintain temperature. So that was, a huge, huge win. Uh, what I'll say is it taught us a lot about, what does resilience really mean? Because some of the standards currently, some of the FDA standards, um, you know, don't necessarily go up even to that 50-degree C mark and don't necessarily prepare the current shippers on the market and kind of compare the industry broadly for that. So, just a few stats. The Journal of American Pharmacists said that 68 in their study that they did, this is a published study, found that about 68% of medications were out of temperature spec at some time during shipping. And actually, then there was a larger kind of publication from the New York Times that said the National Association Boards of Pharmacy found that 90% had exceeded appropriate temperature. And that's of mail order medications. So those are medications going directly or in theory directly to patients. So all of this really has led us to say, okay, how do we take these learnings and build an even more resilient product? And I think that was our biggest finding from the summer is that um, you have to be ready for the extremes and you have to be able to think about, the unexpected. So ultimately, I think that was one pretty large takeaway from kind of the pilot work. We continue to do more pilots, and we're very open to working with companies, whether it be sponsors, CROs, or we've now just started to work with more mobile phlebotomy networks and folks that are supporting patients. Tends to be more in rural communities. So feel free to reach out to us. We would love to do that, and we're all about publishing our data and actually trying to find ways to make the industry more transparent.
Um, I gotta say I don't love I I I love that you guys have had a great thing, had a great pilot program and had a great summer. I don't love some of the stats that you brought of like mail order medicine coming so many out of temperature spec, which I know is not a you guys thing. That's just like an industry problem as a whole. Gotta say, as a consumer, I don't love that. Um,
Yeah,
it's
well,
not
and
great.
really know the impact, right? Like part of what this research is exploring is, anything that's, going into a human or coming from a human. It's like, what is the impact of being out of spec and, the kind of what the efficacy impact. And so the article, which I can send to you, maybe you can link in the footnotes, but um, it does explore some ideas around it. But again, we know there's a problem.
Yeah.
We don't know the impact fully of that problem yet.
It's one of those where you're like, "Oh, no, there's a problem and there's a bunch of solutions, but which one's the right one, and what do we do until those solutions get, like, widely adopted?" So I love that. Just wonderful.
Yeah, well, we're here to solve it. I mean, that to us is such a great um, indication that what we're building really has meaningful impact from the get go, right? And like
So
that says, hey, this is something that Artyc can be a part of the solution for.
Speaking of that solution, so I know that the MedStow devices, you have a couple different sizes, but when it comes to like that longevity part of it, if I'm a consumer that regularly gets maybe insulin shipped to my door and it needs to stay pretty cold, and I get this product, is it just kind of like I get it and then I can like throw it away, or like how many uses can it like an average shipper get out of this?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mary. So everything we do is reusable, and that's kind of key to both what allows us to build some of that kind of reliability and the way we've designed the product, but then also form of just reducing waste broadly across the industry. So everything that will last over a year. So we're talking dozens of shipments. Um, we actually did our first LCA, which is a life cycle assessment earlier in this year, and we found that from a carbon perspective, the Medstone Micro is only 6 kilograms of CO2e. Um, I know that that number doesn't mean a lot in the abstract, but the way to think about that is, about 90% of that comes from what we call the use phase. So an LCA looks at everything from manufacturing to shipping to what happens when you're using a product all the way to end of life and disposal. And so if you think about the use phase, that's where you're actually, packing something, sending it, to the pharmacy, to the hospital. And so, from LCA perspective, what we saw was there were kind of two large drivers. One is the transit method, right? So, if you're going on a light duty vehicle, if you're overnight air shipping, right, like that's going to have a big impact from a carbon perspective. But then, actually, compared to the status quo, one of the ways we really help reduce emissions is actually eliminating the need for dry ice. And so, dry ice, most people don't realize, right, is CO2e, or I'm going to repeat that, um, is by eliminating dry ice. And most people don't realize dry ice is carbon dioxide. And so, when you're shipping with dry ice, you are sublimating or you are kind of emitting carbon dioxide. And the average pharmaceutical shipment often has close to anywhere from 2 to 5 kilograms of carbon dioxide per shipment, or of dry ice per shipment. And so, we're excited to say, hey, you no longer need to use that dry ice. That's both like reducing your hazmat, reducing kind of some of the operational inefficiencies, reducing some supply chain risks, and then also taking that out of the equation. The other thing we think we can do is, reduce the need for some of that overnight air shipping. And so by providing reliable 2-day and by optimizing transit more broadly, we see opportunities in reducing kind of the emissions from that piece. So we actually worked with one of the top pharma companies this summer, specifically as one of our pilots on this. And we did a full work with them to really map out what the emissions reductions, or what the emissions piece from using an Artyc shipper, an Artyc Medstow shipper looks like relative to what their current status quo is. I unfortunately can't talk about that, but we'll hopefully be publishing more in the new year and kind of being able to share with the industry some of our findings. So that was a really, great way to just have that side by side comparison and kind of show where we think there are really meaningful, pretty low hanging fruit opportunities.
Well, because also when it comes to, like, that dry ice replacement, obviously, if you use a hunk of dry ice this big f to a shipment, well, you have to store that dry ice, which means you have to buy maybe twice as much because while it's being stored, it's still sublimating, it's still, like, deteriorating. So, I feel like that's kind of like it you're buying to intentionally waste part of your dry ice, whereas you could just not and get the same, if not better results, because then you're suddenly reducing your supply chain costs and your shipping costs because you don't have to next day air something. You can just slap a label on it and go. And also especially in those closed loop systems, this is kind of the easiest way to tackle it, right? It's because you have those closed loop systems. If you know you have someone that needs insulin every month, when they go to get their new thing of insulin, they could just hand the old one back and vice versa. So that way it's just constantly getting back in the cycle. And I mean, shoot, or even faster than that. You just slap a label on it and FedEx will come pick it up from your doorstep. I cannot say enough how much I love the creative solutions that are coming out of this because especially in that home delivery of medicine, which I know a lot more insurance carriers are pushing for, you're going to get the higher quality and you're going to get that peace of mind of knowing, okay, my insulin or whatever has been at the same temperature the entire time. I don't have to worry about putting it into my body because I know it's going to do what it's supposed to do.
100%. I love that you mentioned how the closed loop system, because that's exactly what we're, going for, is thinking about, what does it look like to fully be able to say, hey, maybe you've shipped directly to someone, and then maybe they've actually used one of the patient self-sampling devices, drawn their own blood and shipped it back to the lab. And so maybe actually every single journey is an active cooling journey. You're not just sending it back empty, but you're able to have a full um, kind of full opportunity to really, improve healthcare delivery and just meet patients where they are.
But I just really love kind of that, like you said, you're meeting people where they're at. That's game changing for, chronic illness people or people with mobility issues or people in rural areas where it might take them an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to the clinic or just like the local doctor. And I love that it's just so much more accessible for people. And that way you don't have to, worry about how do I get to the doctor? How do I get to all these different appointments? If I can just take a sample and send it in. Obviously, it's not a one size fits all for everything, but for most of like a routine test, it's a fantastic solution. And again, if I can just put it in there, slap a label on it, FedEx comes and picks it up, and I don't have to leave my house. I just spend 10 minutes doing it. Sold, immediately sold.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the kind of rural component. But mortality rates are 23% higher in most rural communities compared to their urban counterparts. And then in that, we see about a 61% shortage of what's called primary care health. Sorry, I'm sorry. Yep. We see 61% shorter. I always do this. And then when we look at what's called a primary care health professional shortage area, that's a metric that the US government tracks around, availability of healthcare professionals. 61% shortage in rural areas. And so we just don't see as many healthcare professionals and don't have access to nearly as many healthcare professionals. And so being able to, really enable that last mile is even more critical in those areas. And so we actually just are excited to be partnering with an organization called Elemental Impact. And they're one of the leaders in thinking about deploying technology equitably across the US. And so we'll be working with them with our newest product, which is coming out early next year, on how we support communities, in rural healthcare, and really in that kind of we're partnering with a couple national mobile phlebotomy networks to support patients across, close to not all 50, but close to all 50 states.
That is, man, 2025 so starting off like with a banger for you guys. You got some brand new research data to come out. I'm gonna call it top secret research data because it's top secret research. Um, which I mean, obviously, when you publish it, it won't be top secret anymore, but until then it is. And then you have all these amazing partnerships. It's like, man, what's next? Is there anything else next other than just trying to grow and help out as many people as you can?
Yeah, I mean, we always have things kind of on the pipeline. We're constantly innovating. So looking at, working with more partners on our kind of next product that we're launching. So that's the Medsto 5L, so our 5-liter intercampus unit. We'll be looking for kind of additional partners around our shippable version of that product as well. And then more than anything, if for folks who want to collaborate with us on the research space, looking to continue to publish. So whether that be, labs, various trial sponsors, or just anyone who's open to kind of what I would say working in a kind of deployment aimed at publishing, we're very excited to chat.
I absolutely love that. You guys, everyone needs to slide into Hannah's DMs, because
So
I think it's so cool because it brings so much to so many people, and I think it's a fantastic solution for the pharmaceutical and the healthcare space, specifically because it just solves so many problems. And I mean, what a way to come in right when everybody needs to start reducing their emissions and improve their supply chain. So I'm really excited for 2025 for you guys. That being said, Hannah, we have a question everybody on the show has to answer, and it's your turn. You've dropped banger statistic after banger statistic, so I have a good feeling about this. Is cereal considered a soup?
milk soup, why not? I'm here for it. I've never had it, but I've never had milk soup, but I think we could invent it, and we could keep it cold, most importantly, so we could transport it.
So it'd be like a cold milk soup gazpacho situation?
Yeah, gazpacho with, a little sprinkling of cereal flakes. You can pick your cereal flakes. It's kinda like a topping bar, you could choose what you
Okay,
want,
alright.
customizable.
I
Yeah.
like it, I like it. I am personally team cereal's not a soup, but that's okay. There are both 2 sides to every story. Um, so if
Well,
anyone
here's my question for you.
Mhm.
Is a burrito a ravioli?
Okay, I don't think so, because a ravioli implies that there's pressed edges, like, you have to it's, like,
What about an
crimped.
empanada? Is an empanada a ravioli?
Like, empanada is a calzone because it's just folded over.
Hmm.
Because there's a fold on one side. A ravioli implies all 4 sides have been
Ah,
pressed. A
okay, okay.
burrito, though, is its own situation, the all-encompassing thing. I would make the argument that a corn dog is like a burrito.
Like flour wrapped filling.
Yes.
Okay,
Um, and then, but yeah, no, an empanada is a calzone
okay.
because there's a
Empanadas.
fold.
So, and this is like, did you ever take those standardized tests growing up and you had to do the analogies? Like,
Yes.
if an
Yes.
empanada is to a calzone, like a burrito is to fill in the blank.
Yes. This would not be on these would not be the answers. Alright. So, if anyone has any good milk soup recipes that sounds so weird to say. Or if they have any more questions or are curious about the research you're doing over there, where can they find you outside the show?
Sure. So, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, Hannah Sieber, at Artyc. You can email hello@shipartyc.com, and those will all get passed to me if you mention my name. Uh, but also, we're at a bunch of conferences, and we're out in the industry, so we'd love to always meet in person. If you find yourself at any of the kind of large clinical pharma events coming up, I'm thinking of Scope, JP Morgan Healthcare, Bio, in the new year. So please reach out. We'd love to chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You can catch other episodes of Running on Ice right here on FreightWaves TV, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Need more Running on Ice news? No sweat. Subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. See you on the internet.